You are shot in the leg on a Civil War battlefield. The bullet is a Minié ball, half an inch wide, an ounce and a half of lead, moving at 900 feet per second. It doesn't pass through your bone, it shatters it into dozens of fragments, like an explosion inside your leg. A surgeon examines you. He has 30 seconds to make a decision: amputate or don't. If he amputates within 24 hours, your chance of dying is 27%. If he waits, your chance of dying doubles. He picks up his saw, and in 7 minutes, your leg is gone. 60,000 soldiers went through this in 4 years, without modern antibiotics, without blood transfusions, without the germ theory of disease, and 73% of them survived. How? Welcome to old American ways. Before we go back to 1861, if you want the real stories of how Americans survived the impossible, subscribe right now. This channel exists for this: the forgotten survival knowledge, the extreme conditions, the people who found a way when there seemed to be no way. Hit like if that 7-minute amputation hit you differently than you expected, and share this with someone who thinks modern medicine has always existed. Now, let's go back to the beginning of the war and understand what these men were actually up against. To understand what Civil War soldiers survived, you need to understand what medicine was in 1861, because it was nothing like what we have today. In 1861, there was no germ theory of disease. Louis Pasteur had published his germ theory just 1 year earlier, in 1860, and almost no one in America had heard of it yet. Surgeons in 1861 did not wash their hands before operating, not because they were careless, because they had no idea that invisible microorganisms could cause infection. They didn't know, nobody knew. Surgical instruments were not sterilized. A surgeon would operate on one man, wipe his instruments on his apron, and move to the next patient. The apron, stiff with dried blood from previous surgeries, was considered a badge of experience. A busy surgeon had a very bloody apron. That was a sign of skill. There were no antibiotics. Penicillin would not be discovered for another 67 years. There were no blood transfusions, no x-rays, no understanding of how infections spread. What they did have, and this is important, was chloroform and ether. Despite the popular myth that Civil War surgeons operated without anesthesia, this is almost entirely false. 95% of Civil War surgeries were performed under anesthesia. Chloroform was the most common. Administered on a cloth held over the face, a soldier would lose consciousness in about 2 minutes. So the surgery itself, as brutal as it was done while the patient was unconscious. The real killer was not the surgery. The real killer was what came after: infection. In a world without antibiotics, without sterile technique, without any understanding of how bacteria spread, a wound that would be easily treated today could kill a man in 48 hours. Hospital gangrene was one of the most feared conditions of the entire war. A small black spot would appear on a wound. It would spread. The tissue would begin to rot, literally rot, while the patient was still alive. The smell was described by survivors as unlike anything they had ever experienced. Doctors tried everything: cauterizing the infected flesh, silver nitrate, turpentine-soaked bandages. Most cases ended in amputation or death. This was the medical world that 3 million American soldiers entered when they went to war. Now let me walk you through what actually happened in a Civil War amputation, because the reality is both more brutal and more remarkable than most people know. A soldier is brought to the field hospital. He is in shock. His leg is shattered by a Minié ball. The bone in dozens of fragments, muscle destroyed, arteries damaged. The surgeon examines him in about 30 seconds. He has hundreds of men waiting. He cannot spend more time. His decision, based on what he can see and feel, is to amputate. An assistant administers chloroform. The soldier goes unconscious in about 2 minutes. The surgeon picks up his scalpel. He makes 2 circular cuts through the skin, called flaps, designed to fold over the stump and provide cushioning. He pulls the skin back. He cuts through the muscle. He ties off the major blood vessels with silk or cotton thread, because if he doesn't, the patient bleeds to death in minutes. Then he picks up his bone saw and he saws through the bone, quickly, efficiently, with the skill of a man who has done this hundreds of times. In the worst battles, surgeons performed amputations continuously for 48 to 72 hours. Without sleep, the most skilled surgeons could complete an amputation in 7 minutes, not because they were rushing carelessly, because speed saved lives. Every minute under anesthesia was a risk. Every minute of open surgery was a risk of blood loss. The faster the surgery, the better the outcome. When it was done, the flaps of skin were folded over the stump, sewn closed, dressed with whatever was available, and the soldier was carried to a recovery cot to wait, to see if the wound became infected, to see if the gangrene came, to see if the 73% or the 27% was his fate. Now let me tell you about the men, because these were not statistics, these were human beings, with names, families, and futures, who went through something we can barely imagine. Private James Hanger, 19 years old, from Churchville, Virginia. He was the first soldier to have his leg amputated in the Civil War, at the Battle of Philippi on June 3, 1861. The Confederate surgeon amputated his leg above the knee to save his life. Hanger was sent home to recover, and lying in his parents' house, unable to walk, unable to work, he didn't give up. He took barrel staves, pieces of wooden barrels, and carved himself a prosthetic leg, not a crude peg leg, a functional artificial limb with hinged joints at the knee and ankle. He called it the Hanger limb. He filed a patent in 1891. His company, Hanger Prosthetics, still exists today. It is the largest prosthetics company in the United States. One amputee, one barn, some barrel staves, and a company that has helped millions of people walk again. Then there was Corporal Calvin Bates of the 20th Maine Infantry, the regiment that held Little Round Top at Gettysburg. Bates was wounded at Gettysburg. He underwent surgery. He recovered. He went back to his regiment and finished the war. And then there were the ones who didn't make it, the 27%, the ones for whom the surgery came too late, or the gangrene came too fast, or whose bodies simply could not fight off the infection in a world without antibiotics. Their names are on the monuments at Gettysburg, at Antietam, at Chickamauga. 620,000 men total. Some estimates now say 750,000. More Americans died in the Civil War than in every other American war combined, and 2/3 of those deaths were not from bullets. They were from disease, from infection, from wounds that became infected in a world that didn't understand why wounds became infected. The soldiers who survived did so through a combination of the speed and skill of their surgeons, their own physical condition, and what we can only call extraordinary luck. in a war where luck was the difference between coming home on your feet or coming home in a box. But here is what makes the Civil War medical story different from pure tragedy. The doctors learned. In 4 years, in the most extreme conditions imaginable, American medicine advanced more than it had in the previous century. Dr. Jonathan Letterman was appointed medical director of the Army of the Potomac in 1862. He looked at the chaos of the first year of the war. Wounded men left on battlefields for days, hospital wagons driven by civilians who fled when the shooting started. And he built something that had never existed before: the modern ambulance system. Letterman organized dedicated ambulance corps, trained soldiers, not civilians, whose only job was to retrieve the wounded from the battlefield. He established a triage system, categorizing wounds by severity to treat the most salvageable cases first. He created a 3-tier hospital system: field dressing stations close to the battle, field hospitals slightly behind, general hospitals further back. Every element of this system is still in use today, in every army in the world, in every civilian trauma center. Jonathan Letterman's system, born in the blood of the Civil War, is why trauma medicine works the way it does in 2026. The surgeons also learned that speed of amputation dramatically improved survival. They learned that certain wound dressings worked better than others, without knowing why. By 1864, Union surgeons had discovered that pouring carbolic acid over infected wounds controlled gangrene. They didn't know they were killing bacteria. Germ theory hadn't reached them yet. But they observed that it worked, and they used it. That empirical observation, or the practical, battlefield-tested knowledge, saved thousands of lives and laid the groundwork for Joseph Lister's antiseptic surgery, which would revolutionize medicine within a decade of the war's end. The Civil War soldiers didn't just survive the worst medical crisis in American history. Their suffering and the ingenuity of the doctors who treated them built the foundation of modern American medicine. The next time you are in a hospital or an ambulance or a trauma center, think about this. The triage system that determines who gets treated first. Jonathan Letterman. Civil War, 1862. The ambulance corps that brings you there. Jonathan Letterman. Civil War, 1862. The field hospital structure. Letterman, 1862. The antiseptic principles that keep your wound from becoming infected, begun by Civil War surgeons who poured carbolic acid on wounds without knowing why it worked, and the prosthetic limb that might one day help you or someone you love. James Hanger, a 19-year-old Confederate soldier, some barrel staves, a barn in Virginia, 1861. 620,000 men died in the Civil War, and from their suffering is from the desperate ingenuity of the surgeons who treated them, came a medical system that has saved millions of lives in the 160 years since. That is what survival looks like at the largest scale, not just one man surviving, an entire system of medicine surviving and growing out of the worst 4 years in American history. This has been Old American Ways. Subscribe if these stories matter to you. Share this with someone who has never thought about where modern medicine came from. And tell me in the comments, which part of this surprised you most? Old American Ways, where the past is never truly gone, truly